Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cornelia. Please keep your comments down below. Very supportive, very positive, very informative. I don't want to see anybody arguing. I don't want anyone talking about how this is more important than this. All lives matter, we know this. But today we're gonna focus on Black lives, okay? Black community. Around May 2020, what happened with George Floyd being the catalyst to people speaking out and being tired of the mistreatment towards Black people. It travelled worldwide. A lot of people got very overwhelmed. It was a very stressful time because we've got other things going on in the world as well. And as a Black person, I felt heavily affected by this, especially being home alone and having to self-quarantine. And I'm very active, as you know, on social media. You know, you're listening to me here on YouTube. I'm gonna have to take myself back to what mental state I was at that time. And as you guys know, I was very overwhelmed going back into work. When returning to school, one of my favorite teachers, we used to have a lot of in-depth conversations. Very intelligent woman, very aspirational, and loved teaching. And when we spoke, it was always about like worldly things. She was just so enlightened. Should I use that word? But I felt like she was so enlightened. And we were speaking about the situation, what was happening with the Black community, injustice around the world, but especially in America, and how that affects me and my life. And you know, she would ask me a lot of questions. And she turned to me and she said, you know what? Why don't you tell the students what's going on? It's kind of a hot topic. Hate to say it, but at the time, yeah, it was a hot topic, and now's your chance. I'm not gonna lie, at first I felt very intimidated because it's not an easy topic to talk about. I guess there was the fear of them looking at me differently, and I know I'm already different, but I'm their English teacher, you know, and I didn't want them to think that they had to step on eggshells around me. I don't know, I just went through all these thoughts. At that time I was like very oversaturated with, you know, people going hard, and seeing that constantly, it can be very draining. You know, it's a good thing and people need to understand and learn, so I was all for it, but you know, it can take a toll on your health. So I was like, do I really want to go down this road? But then I slapped myself and I was like, Cornelia, hello, no, this is a good thing. Some students still won't understand afterwards, but all I can say is that I tried. Not that I had to, but I just felt it was my duty to do Japan a favour and kind of at least help a little bit by educating my students at least. You have your moments where you complain how people are so small-minded here and people don't have exposure to the outside world. I mean, yeah, they watch the news. A lot of people watch the news, but do they really have any friends? Do they have any family? Have they ever been in contact with a foreigner, with a Black person? Probably not. Now is your chance to use the tools that you have, to use the platform that you have to express how you feel and teach. Of course, this was all approved beforehand, guys. I did make sure that everything wasn't too graphic for them, because the real issue about it is very graphic. It's disgusting, and if they saw the real of it, their little hearts would just explode. They would not be able to take it. I mean, learning about Japanese history is gory enough. Imagine learning about Black history too. On my Instagram, I asked a lot of questions. Facebook group, Black Women in Japan, or Black in Japan. I think there's two I'm a part of. But I did ask around about if people had taught that at school, and you know, what kind of topics did I think were interesting, what kind of resources. So a lot of minds went into this, helping me to kind of navigate and plan out what I wanted to say and teach. And the first thing I thought to myself was, firstly, the Japanese. Unless you're Black, you're never gonna know what it's like being a Black person. People are used to their own kind. All they know is the Japanese culture. They don't know the outside world like that. A lot of people that I've come across do, but mostly a lot of people just don't. They're at junior high school age, so they're old enough to start thinking about worldly issues and talking about that, and that's something that I teach. There's 3 grades in junior high school, so you've got 1st grade, 2nd grade and 3rd grade within junior high school, and I only taught this or talked about this and discussed this with 3rd grade because they had the highest skill level and were already starting to think about world issues and the news and making debates and writing essays and things like that. intelligent school, very intelligent school. So I was very lucky, and I thought, you know what, they can do this, they can understand, and I'm gonna help them as simply as possible to relate to what is going on and understand that they are a part of this world. So I asked the teachers to play a video. The video was subtitled in Japanese so they could understand everything that was going on, but this video is a very old video. Was it 50s or 60s? Around that time, a lady did an experiment, blue eyes and brown eyes. She separated the group and she said, you know what, blue eyes, you are important, you are so special. And she'd encourage them with positive words and say, you know, you're so smart, you're so amazing. And they got privileges like drinking out of the water fountain, and they'd get extra long play times and stuff like that. These kids, mind you, were like maybe like 8 years old or 7 years old, very young and easily influenced. So the teacher says, these are the rules. The brown-eyed children, they're bad, and the blue-eyed children are great, they're the best. And she watched the habits of the blue-eyed children and how they became more dominant and controlling, superiority that they felt, and how the brown-eyed people felt. Some of the kids became very frustrated, very angry, their mood started to change, very upset and agitated easily, and their grades dropped because they were suppressed. And eventually they get to swap, and the brown-eyed children become the new favourites, the blue-eyed children become the naughty children. Of course, it tilts again. So both sides got to experience what it felt like. And after that, she kind of made a point to say, this is how other races feel. This is how black people feel. And it's not a nice feeling, right? And they were like, no. And I think they actually got it. They understood. And then they came back as adults and they watched the video and they reflected and said, you know, that changed my perception on how to treat others, treat them like human beings, because it's not fair, it's not right. Yeah, I'd recommend you watch it. And if you ever want to do anything like this, show your kids in junior high school, I would limit it to grade 3, and then above you can just show them and they'll have a lot more to say. But you will probably need a lot of support from your school, which I luckily got. I'm so thankful for that. It was approved by the teachers, everybody knew what was happening, everybody saw the information. There's a lot of people that probably don't really want to touch those kind of subjects or deal with it because it makes them feel uncomfortable, but my teachers are badass. I felt very supported in that moment, which was great. So I started with, yeah, strong figures and how they contributed to society and helped the freedom and rights of people of colour. There's a famous picture as well that I showed of coloured people and white people, and it was a drinking water fountain, and I said to them, which one do you think you belong to? And they were like, the coloured. And I was like, right? And I said, even though you're Japanese, you are coloured, we are the same. Of course we're not exactly the same, this is obvious, duh, like, you know, everybody's different anyways, but like, you are part of that category. You were looked down upon too. No, you were treated differently. You were oppressed too. So I had to make that point. I did show some slavery pictures, but they weren't too gory or graphic. It was just like, you get the point, they're in chains. And I related it back to what was going on at the current time, and still is going on now, with the macaroni. I showed them pictures of the treatment of Asian people once this started to happen in the world, how people shifted their behaviors and started disrespecting and being aggressive and violent and desecrating certain places and areas. There was one picture that stood out to me of Mulan, because at the time I think Mulan was new and it came out of Disney. A lot of kids in junior high school know about Disney movies, and I did explain briefly what it was about. Mulan is a famous Disney story about a Chinese girl who leaves home. She disguises herself as a man and works her way up through the ranks and becomes a very important player in the war. It's just a very empowering film. I love Mulan. I don't like that version, but okay, we won't go into that. I showed the picture of Mulan, and somebody spray painted like a mask on her face. It was something offensive that they graffitied over this advertisement for Mulan. If you were to go to America or somewhere else, you could be lumped into this category. People don't know if you're Japanese, South Korean, Indonesian, Filipino or Japanese or whatever. Like, they don't know. People get lumped together. This is something that we have to combat, and you've got to understand, learn to have sympathy for other people that are outside of your race and culture. It's just good, right? Being a decent human being. So remember, there are people who live here, even though we're a small percentage. Just be kind to others and not disrespect anyone just because they don't look like you, speak like you. It's ridiculous, isn't it, really? Like, it's a shame that we have to even say this, but here we are. Yeah, I showed them those kind of pictures and more pictures about Asians, you know, being treated differently because of the macaroni. So that's how I got them to kind of try and understand that they're in this too, and this kind of behavior can shift from one culture to another, from one race to another. You know, if you let one thing pass, then what's next? Who's next? And I don't want any of my students being shitty human beings. Thank you. The hardest parts was talking and relating back to me. You know, they see me every day on a weekday. They know, oh, this is Corny Sensei, this is our teacher. And they know my background. I am black, and I had to tell them of experiences that I had back in the UK of racism. And even though I've been very lucky and blessed, and I always say this, I haven't really had too much racist experiences, I still have had some, and being treated differently. And even though it's not as direct as other countries, I've still been affected by it. And so I had to explain that, you know, from verbal abuse, behaviors, judgment, and racial profiling with them. And I showed them pictures of my childhood and how it was like growing up, and I had to give them like a little synopsis. It didn't feel great, it was uncomfortable, but for them to attach it to somebody that they know, it makes it more real that people actually do go through this. You know, it's tangible. People always learn better when there's someone in their life affected by this. So that's another thing that I managed to do. It's also good to relate to current situations and what's happening in Japan as well. I mentioned it in one of my videos. NHK were trying their very best to inform the Japanese public about what was happening with black society, but it just wasn't executed in the best way, and a lot of people got offended. Even one of my friends ended up appearing on TV to kind of speak out and speak up for us to help people understand. NHK did apologize. They were just trying their best, but they really need to communicate with, you know, black people or whatever the topic is. If it's not Japanese, you need to talk to other foreigners. Get with it. Anyways, they apologized about that, and I did explain all of that to them, but I was like, this is how misinformation can damage people, and you don't want to do that. So you want to educate yourself, and this is, I'm here to help you. How Japan had done blackface in the past. Talked about Naomi Osaka, because a lot of my students love her. She was a hot topic, and she's still here, but like especially in 2020, two people were talking about her bleaching her skin and making jokes like, oh, she should be whiter, and just that colorism. So I had to talk to them about colorism. I talked to them about sexism too. So I provided explanations about the treatment of women in the workplace and in society, especially in Japanese society. Homophobia, xenophobia, prejudice. Spoke about as like many important topics as I could, providing pictures and references and media. Stan, World of Extra on TikTok. I think he's mixed with Japanese and Filipino. He speaks English very well, and he knows Tagalog. Did I say that right? Tagalog. I'm sorry if you're Filipino. And Japanese too. Bilingual and part of the LGBTQ plus society. He's very young in age, so I felt like he was closer to my students. And hopefully, you know, being bilingual but also being kind of cool, because he's a cool dude. In such a conservative society, we need more people like that who are, you know, encouraging people to be their true selves and speak up for different communities. Another resource I used is the Blossom Project. I follow them on Instagram, so I'll link all these people that I've mentioned down below. They always provide sources of information for what's going on in the world. They're so excellent, and they translate everything from English to Japanese and vice versa. And I showed them a few shots of, you know, explaining what Black Lives Matter is. A lot of them would understand that because they have seen it floating around in social media. Even in Japan, you'll still have issues of being treated differently because of, you know, colorism or social status, gender that you are, if you're the firstborn, the secondborn, like there's all kinds of factors that people have to deal with here in Japan. There's a struggle everywhere. It's just, as a foreigner, I can just do the best and speak up for us, as well as me being black and speak up for us too. So I was trying to speak up for everyone. I did my best, guys. I did prepare a script, but sometimes I just had to go off the dome and like roll with it and answer some questions that my students had. They were allowed to ask questions in Japanese, and I'd asked the teacher to translate for this class only. Usually you are asked to speak only English with within Japanese schools. Unless they're very, very young, then you're probably allowed to mix it up. The older they get, the more English that you are supposed to speak with them to encourage them to use the language that they've learned. For this topic though, I thought it was important, and my teachers thought it was important to get the message across clearly. So I would speak in English, but they would translate and check that the students were understanding what was happening. I got them to write about what they learned. Do they think that it's important to learn about these things? And a lot of the feedback was really interesting, to be honest. So many beautiful, thoughtful comments. It gave me hope. My students, man, I love my students. I think it went really well. Hopefully that will plant the seed so that in the future they can remember this moment and remember that they knew somebody from this kind of community, knew someone of colour, foreigner, a woman, somebody who had to deal with these kind of oppressive situations in her life. Just share stuff, because we are the foreigner representatives. I know there's some people here that think it's like a clown's job and they don't take their job seriously. I don't take myself too seriously either, but when it comes down to it, I'm still here to share, and that is something I want to do and always will want to do, no matter what environment I'm in, to help raise these kids, because that's what you are doing essentially. You're helping raise them into human beings that are taught how to think about things, have opinions, voice their opinions, not judge people, become more open and accepting to others, even if you don't agree, to still have that respect. This lesson was spread across 2 lessons, because they had the video in one lesson and like started to think about what was happening, and then in the second it was like my part, sharing the history and sharing my personal situation and relating it back to them and talking about other issues in the world that we should, you know, be mindful of. Then we had reflection time and question time. But I think that was the main gist of all the resources I used. So big thank you to everybody that helped. Big thank you to, you know, people who choose to speak up and do so much good work towards contributing to the talk, the conversation, sticking up for human rights. I'm all for it, and if you're all for it and for me, please subscribe. My goal is to get to 10,000 community members. I've been doing this for a while now. I know a lot of people come and dip in and watch, but I would really appreciate your support. I'm trying to get to that goal, and hopefully you found this really informative. And I could always speak about other issues like this, but I do like to keep things happy and share things that I enjoy when I vlog or when I do fun video. That is my kind of therapy, but of course, ish goes down in the world, you know. I want to show the real side of Japan and the issues that we deal with here. So please let me know if there's anything else you want to hear about, talk about, see. If you've liked this video, give it a like. Follow me on Instagram, because I like to post videos there. I think that's it. I think I'm done. I love my community and I love you guys for watching. Thank you so much, and until next time, fight up, gambate, peace and love. Bye.